Kevin, so another common question sometimes the interviewer will ask would be, so what are you good at? Or what are your strengths that helps you perform in this job or in this role? So if I get asked about this type of question, what would be considered a good answer from the HR perspective?
Okay, so if you're asking about strengths, again, this is something you should have prepared, right? I really suggest that you don't do it on the fly because it always goes wrong. And the strength I would highlight first and foremost would be in the interpersonal skills context. What I mean by interpersonal skills are, for example, the following: communication skills, um, time management skills, organization skills, analytical skills, problem-solving skills, ability to work under pressure, etc. I call it interpersonal because all these skills are not technical in nature. There is no, university courses that actually specifically teaches you these things. We tend to learn these things throughout life. And it's not always going to be in an educational context. And these things gradually become part of us. And so everybody has a different degree of competence, in my humble opinion, about these things. So if I ask you, Francis, are you strong at all of them equally? Probably the answer is not all of them, right? Maybe you're selectively strong on one or two or three. And so ask yourself this question before you go to the interview. What are some of these items that I am better at than the average person that I have met? Okay, that you've met. Doesn't matter what everybody else says, but all of those people that you've met, your friends and whatever, what are two or three things that you're better at the average person? Maybe it's communication. Maybe it's, let's say, patience. Maybe, let's say, it's listening skills. So a lot of people come and ask me, and they don't even think that these are skills or abilities. And so they come up with nothing, right? So I think there's a big misunderstanding about when someone asks a question, what are you good at? That it has to be technical. Oh, I'm good at accounting. I'm good at finance, which is easy to quantify because I've got this certificate, I've got that qualification, right? It's easy to back up. But when it comes to soft skills, okay, people find it difficult to back up, so they don't want to talk about it, okay? And I think this is potentially a mistake because if you're, let's say, a student and you have not found your first job yet, there is no work experience to talk about. Internship is a work taster. It's not an experience. It's like a movie trailer. You're not seeing the whole thing. You are, dipping your toes into the water a little bit, getting a feel for it. But I'm not giving you real responsibility because you're only here for 2 to 3 months. So what I'm looking for are great raw materials, like interpersonal skills. If I sit you down here, are you a self-starter? Would you introduce yourself around people and make them, friendly to you? Are you being friendly to them? Do you know how to ask the right questions? Do you set up time schedules with these people yourself to learn about certain things? All those kind of things, which in practice at work happens every day, right? But as your boss, I don't want to be telling you every single detail. So in the interview, I want to have a glimpse into how you conduct your own life. And the only way I can find that out is through interpersonal skills. So I'm making a projection. Well, if this guy's good at this with that example, he'll probably be okay at that, right? So first of all, focus on the interpersonal skills that you think you're better than the average person. If you don't know what that is, ask your best friends. But tell your best friends that you want an honest answer, not something that you want to hear, right? Please, guys, I don't mind if you hurt my feelings, but I want to know the honest truth. What do you think I'm good at? And then you try to then come up with examples in your life, at your internship, or during your time at school, examples that will support that skill that you're particularly strong at. Then to tell me, say, Kevin, there are 2 or 3 things here that I'm particularly strong at. One is this, second is that. For example, during that time doing this, I was doing this, that. So short examples, 1 or 2 minutes, right? To give to each of the points to support it. And it comes across far stronger if you just say, well, I'm good at these 3 things. Because I may not ask you for example, but if you offer it to me, that to me is a sign of confidence, and it's a sign of a substantial proof that you're telling the truth. So that's how I would start with that question.
Yeah, I think there's a very fine balance between speaking confidently and speaking arrogantly, right? Because obviously you don't want to be perceived by the HR as someone who is arrogant, to just talk about all your good things about yourself. But in the job interview, you still need to demonstrate that you are confident about what you are good at. So I think it's a very tricky thing, and it comes with time and comes practice, right?
Yeah, I think especially with Asians, right? We are taught to be modest, we're taught to be humble. And I think most of the time we overplay on that virtue in the interview, and we appear to be less confident versus people from other cultures, right? Not necessarily even Western, even from, let's say, from India, they would appear the way they speak that they're more confident about their abilities. So, and when that happens, it does not work to our advantage, because everything else being equal, then perception is the reality. Everybody's got a similar degree. Everybody got a similar score in the degree. Okay. Neither here nor there. Oh, what is my impression of this person? Well, this person appeared to be more confident. Click, done. Right. So my suggestion to all the Asian students who tend to be more modest and humble is this. I'm not asking you. So let's say if you rank yourself overall 8 out of 10, I'm not asking you to do anything more than 8 out of 10, but please don't tell me that you're 7 out of 10. Tell me that you are 8 and no more, but no less. Okay. And tell me that with some pride in your voice, but not arrogance. So how would you say that? Well, let's say I'm pretty good at, communication, I'm pretty good at time management, and I'm pretty good at analytical skills. I would say, well, Francis, I think a few of my strengths would be as following. First of all, I'm a good communicator. I spent a lot of time, during my internship, and part of that experience was to be the central point of communication for a project. And I've learned a lot about language and cultural dynamics during that time. And as a result, I find myself much improved in the way I talk to people and being sensitive to their needs. And I think this experience made me aware of how important it is to speak in a certain way that is conducive for group harmony. Secondly, so if I carry this tone of voice, I'm confident about what I'm saying, but I'm not bragging to you, So that balance, right, it needs to be practiced. Because if you never set those things in those tone of voice, it's going to sound very awkward if you say it for the very first time, and the very first time is the interviewer, right? So hopefully you will talk to your friends or some other people at the school beforehand in that tone of voice and get used to that expression.
But before they get to practice, they first need the awareness to know that they need to be deliberate about using a lower tone of voice, right? Just like right now, I'm tuning down my voice, even though maybe not as exaggerated, but it's quite a different, right? If I raise my tone, it comes across more casual, right? But if I drop my tone, it's probably come across more serious, right? Is that what you're referring to as the tone of voice?
No, I think you just use your normal range.
Mm.
Normal range is just like your conversational voice, the way you talk to a friend. No high, but no lower, because that's the most natural. I do not want to exert additional anxiety on you beyond what you already felt for the interview that is ahead, right? So speak in your normal tone. That's okay. Maybe you slow down delivery just a little bit, because when you slow down, you give yourself time to think what to say. And so there's less chance of saying something that is a small error. If you notice, right, if you listen to, let's say, the president, I'm not talking about the current presidents, I'm talking about presidents in prior days where they actually sound like a president. Uh, they speak quite slow. They speak very deliberately and they rarely make a mistake. They spell every word, articulate every word very clearly. So it creates this very clear picture of what they're trying to say. My suggestion for people going for an interview is to do the same thing. It's not about how much you tell me, it's how much I can make sense of what you told me. So if you want to have a huge amount of informational content, you better make sure I could actually process them. And most people can't really process that large amount by ear. They might process better by eyes because that's how we consume information on the phone these days. But in a conversation, if you do not pronounce and articulate every word perfectly at a pace that can be picked up within my ability to pick it up, then I think you might be at risk of losing my attention. So my suggestion is, unless you're already very slow, if you're on an average pace, just slow down, 5 to 10%. That would be enough.
Just one point of clarification in
Yeah.
case the listener doesn't know is when you're referring to the presidents, it's about how they answer question, not how they make the speech, right? Because if they are delivering a speech, obviously they get to practice it, but in the interview, you can't really practice what you're going to say. And also, you don't have a script reminding you of the speech. So are you referring to how the president answer question when asked by a journalist or just a normal conversation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But also the speech, because even if you practice the speech, you would find that there has to be some part of you in the speech. You're not just a robot reading it out, because it requires sensitivity in the way you speak so that I can emotionally connect to you on the speech, right? But yes, I understand what your question is, and yes, the way that I most want to project with my answer was to, if you answer a real time question, how do they answer that real time question? And that would be more likely to an interview, but not necessarily during the press. Sometimes they give TV interviews, right, which is quite relaxed, and he can take the time to answer you. I say those times as well, particularly.
Yeah, it's a very good point about taking your time to answer because I think students, especially let's say in the university or even younger ones, then they are mostly trained or being tested in a very time constrained settings. For example, whenever people got the chance to talk to another in the academic setting, it's usually timed, right? Let's say in an oral exam, you have 1 minute to talk about your answer. So I think students are trained to have this mindset of there's a limited time. I have to finish my answer in the shortest period of time as possible. But in the job interview setting, it's quite different, right? There's usually no such short or fixed time constraint. Maybe it will be around 1 hour, or maybe there's even no time limit in the interview. So I think, Kevin, can you talk a little bit about how the time of the duration or how the HR would perceive the length of the answer if the job applicant takes the time in answering the question?
Yeah. So most of the interviews, in my experience, is somewhere between half an hour to about 45 minutes max, right? Normally somewhere between half an hour to 40 minutes. And so there is some degree of time constraint. You need to understand that there needs to be a certain density to your answer in order to make those points across effectively. And so there are some preparations you need to do in terms of the way you phrase your answer versus a normal conversation. For example, when you make an example to support a certain things that you say, make sure the example itself is not like a string of a novel, right? You have to condense it prior to the interview. Tell me the date, time, what happened, and then tell me what you learned from it, or tell me what is proved, right? That what you say is true. And you need to be aware that when you have the airtime when you're speaking, okay, someone else is observing you. So don't overstay on something in terms of topic unless there's an absolute necessity to do so. Because if you're not prepared and you're just rumbling along, you're going to make a lot of unintentional mistakes that you didn't need to make. So if there is nothing to say, just elegantly say, yeah, that would be my response to that question. Don't drag it on. Wait for the next question. Okay. And so how do you manage this time? Well, when you go in with an interview, you should have some sort of objective. There are certain things that you want me to know. Okay. I might ask you those questions, but then I may not. If I don't, and you still want to tell me because it's important for you to know, is that Kevin, it's really important that you need to know this because if you know, you probably will hire me, right? You need to understand that you need to at least interject me at some point to get those points across. So you need to be aware of at what point of the interview you might do that. So I would suggest that an average interview is maybe, half an hour, 45 minutes. I'll just take it on the short side, half an hour. If by the time it reaches 20 minutes and this person hasn't asked you the question that you want to ask, let's say your strengths, or why do you want to be, working here? Why do you think you're so suitable for this job? Then you say, after you answer my last question, you might say, Kevin, by the way, I do have something I want to share with you that I think would be helpful for you to understand me a bit better that is relevant for this job. Do you mind if I share it with you? You ask my permission? Unlikely I'm going to say, no, Francis, I'm not interested. Just, shut up. Very unlikely to say that. So I would probably say, sure, Francis, share with me. And then you use that time wisely and then give me your personal, pitch, so to speak, about why you should be here, why you're suitable, and what are the evidence that shows that you are suitable.
Is there other points you want to add for this question?
No, I think it's covered a lot. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.